Picture this: Portugal, 1917. A muddy field, a cold, needling rain, and a crowd so large it sounds like a city breathing. Tens of thousands of people pressing forward, eyes fixed on 3 shepherd children who insist the Virgin Mary has been speaking to them. The kids have promised a sign, not a feeling, not a dream, a public event. And then the sky changes. The sun appears to move, spin, fall. Colors spill over the world like stained glass. Here's the part that won't let go. Why did a spectacle witnessed by so many become tied to messages kept private, sealed, delayed, argued over for decades? What was said that couldn't be said out loud? This is Tom McKenzie, and you are listening to Unexplained History. If you are enjoying this show, make sure to subscribe on all major platforms like Apple, Spotify, and Spreaker. And if you want more unexplained content, swing by our website at unexplained.co. Now stay with us, because this mystery isn't just about a miracle. It's about what happens after the miracle, when witnesses go home and institutions start locking words away. The place is Cova da Iria, near Fátima. The date is October 13th, 1917. Portugal is bruised by politics and poverty, and Europe is being fed into World War I. Into that tension walk 3 children, Lucia dos Santos and her cousins Francisco and Jacinta Marto, shepherds, barely educated. They claim a luminous figure has met them month after month, always with instructions, always with urgency. Word spreads. Believers come hungry for proof. Skeptics come armed with notebooks and laughter. Even the weather seems to argue. Rain turns the ground to thick clay, coats to soaked wool, shoes to suctioned mud. And still, the crowd grows, waiting for a promise to either bloom into wonder or collapse into humiliation. At midday, the children signal upward. People lift their chins, squint into a clouded sky. The rain falters, the clouds thin like torn cloth. And then, according to thousands of testimonies, the sun becomes something else. A pale disk you can stare at without pain. It trembles, it spins, it throws off bands of color, yellow, violet, blood red, washing over faces, over fields, over the wet bark of trees. Some say it zigzags, some say it dances, some swear it plunges toward the earth as if the sky is dropping a fiery wheel on the crowd. People scream, they pray, they confess sins to strangers, and then, as suddenly as it began, it ends. There's another detail that keeps getting repeated, quiet but uncanny. Soaked clothing moments later is reported dry. The muddy ground looks less like mud. If it was mass suggestion, why did it leave fingerprints on the physical world? Because the spectacle wasn't the only thing the children claimed to receive. Alongside the apparitions came secrets, messages meant for them and for the church. Over time, the story hardens into a 3-part package. 3 Secrets of Fatima. The first is described as a terrifying vision. The second, a warning tied to war and Russia. The third is where the air turns electric. It's written down later, sealed, and passed upward into Vatican custody, kept from the public for decades. At points, there are expectations of release, deadlines whispered, years mentioned like appointments with fate, and then silence. When the church finally publishes a version in 2000, it doesn't end the dispute. It ignites it. Some accept the explanation. Others insist something is missing. Another page, another sentence, another warning too destabilizing to share. So why does a miracle performed in open air lead to a message locked in a vault? A crowd sees the sun behave like a living thing, and the world never agrees on what that meant. Was it a rare atmospheric event mistaken for the divine? A mass psychological contagion? Or something that really did break the rules, just long enough to be witnessed, recorded, and argued over for the next century? And if the public sign was so overwhelming, why did the most important words arrive wrapped in secrecy, timetables, and sealed envelopes? Next, we travel back to 1917 Portugal, into the politics, the fear, and the daily life that made 3 children's claims explode into a national obsession. Because to understand the secret, we have to understand the scene. Before the headlines, before the crowds and the arguments and the impossible claims, there was only a place, a hillside in Portugal that most of the world couldn't find on a map. To understand what happens next, we have to step back into the Portugal of the early 1900s, when politics felt like an earthquake under your feet, and faith felt like the only steady ground. Because mysteries don't appear in a vacuum. They arrive in a world already humming with fear and expectation. Picture the interior of central Portugal, not the postcard coast. Low stone walls tracing property lines like old scars. Olive trees with silver leaves flickering in the wind. Cork oaks, rough and dark, standing patient on the hills. The roads are more dust than road. Carts creak. Hooves strike rock. In the distance, a bell from a parish church marks the hours with a sound that carries farther than any newspaper. Whitewashed houses sit close to the ground, small and spare, their blue trim fading under the sun. Here, life is measured in seasons: planting, grazing, harvest, and in the thin margin between a good year and hunger. And over it all is an atmosphere you can almost taste. Smoke from cooking fires, damp wool, soil warmed by noon. Children work early, not as a lesson, as a necessity. Shepherd children, barefoot in summer, shivering in winter, guide small flocks across scrub and pasture, their days long and repetitive, their world bounded by hills and the far-off line of a village. Many families are poor enough that every egg matters, every bit of bread is counted. Schooling is irregular, literacy is not assumed. What they know, they learn from the land, from their elders, and from the church. Prayers memorized before they can read, catechism repeated until it becomes part of the mind's furniture. But this is not a tranquil countryside. Portugal has been shaken by revolution, monarchy fallen, a new republic rising, and with it a storm of anti-clerical politics in the cities. Laws change, religious orders are pressured, clergy are watched. In places of power, faith is treated like an old regime to be dismantled. In the villages, though, the church is still the calendar and the conscience. Baptisms, funerals, feast days, processions, these are not optional traditions. They are how a community stays stitched together. So people live with a split reality, public authority shifting and uncertain, while private devotion grows tighter, more urgent. When the world feels unsteady, the supernatural starts to feel plausible. So, this is the world before our story turns. A rural Portugal where hardship is ordinary, where children carry adult responsibilities, and where the church remains a compass, especially when politics can't be trusted. In a place like Fátima, near hamlets like Aljustrel, rumors travel faster than officials, and a whisper of the divine can feel like an answer to a century of uncertainty. And in the next segment, we reach the first moment on the timeline when the ordinary rhythm of shepherd life is interrupted by something that should not have been there at all. May 1917. A dry hillside outside Fátima, Portugal. 3 children watching sheep, counting time by hunger and cloud shadow. And then a flash, like lightning without thunder. In a country already strained by war, poverty, and politics, a rumor begins in the smallest possible way. A whisper from kids who swear they saw someone that shouldn't be there. This is where the incident starts. On May 13th, the Cova da Iria is all scrubgrass and scattered oaks. The air smells of sun-baked stone, sheep wool, and crushed wild herbs underfoot. Lucia, the oldest, keeps one eye on the flock and one on the sky. Jacinta and Francisco drift close, small hands busy with pebbles and stems. Then, light. Not a sunrise, not a flare. A sudden white pulse that makes them flinch. They turn toward a little holm oak and see a figure, bright as a lamp behind gauze, standing above the leaves, not bending a branch. The children will later describe a woman in white, younger than their mothers, radiant but calm, like the light is part of her skin. Her voice, they say, isn't loud. It's close, as if it arrives inside the ear. Do not be afraid. The words land in the hot air, and the place changes, even the sheep quiet, as though listening. She asks them to return on the 13th of each month, at the same hour. And when it's over, the light seems to lift straight up. No footsteps, no rustle, just that impossible vertical motion, leaving the oak and the hillside exactly as it was, except the children are shaking. At home, secrecy lasts minutes. A child's awe spills out like water from a cracked jar. Neighbors lean in doorways, brows pinched. Some laugh, others cross themselves. By June 13th, the path to the cova is a slow-moving line of villagers, boots on dust, murmured rosaries, a few skeptical men with arms folded tight. Noon arrives heavy and still. The children kneel near the same little oak, eyes fixed. Then Lucia stiffens, like she's heard a cue no one else can hear. A hush ripples outward. Some swear the sunlight dims. Others feel a coolness, sudden and unseasonable, like shade passing across their faces. People crane their necks, searching for the thing the children see. A few start crying without warning, embarrassed by their own tears. When the moment ends, there's talk of a sign, small, quick, but repeated in different mouths. A shimmer over the leaves, petals, or something like petals, drifting down and disappearing before they touch the ground. July 13th brings more people, more heat, and sharper tension. The crowd presses closer. The children's faces go pale as they pray. And then Lucia, speaking to the brightness only she can name, asks the question the crowd is holding in its throat. What do you want from me? The answer includes a promise, October, a public miracle, something everyone will see. That promise changes everything. It turns a rural rumor into a deadline. By August, the village is divided into camps: believers, doubters, opportunists, officials who hate the attention. On August 13th, the children are detained, questioned, pressured, separated. Noon comes and goes without them at the cova, and the crowd grows restless, angry, afraid they've been tricked. Then, on August 19th, the children return to the fields at Valinhos. The day is bright, cicadas rasping like tiny saws. And again, the light. Again, that stillness that feels like someone has turned down the world. The message: return. Keep going. October remains. September 13th. Thousands now. The hillside is a patchwork of umbrellas, shawls, and dusty hats. You can smell sweat, damp wool, candle smoke, and the metallic scent of rain that hasn't fallen yet. People jostle for a view of three small figures near a knee-high oak. Some are on their knees in the dirt. Others stand rigid, waiting to catch them in a lie. At noon, the children react in unison, eyes lifted. The crowd surges, then stops. Like a single animal holding its breath. A wind rises and drops. Again, that strange fall of pale flecks, vanishing mid-air. And the promise remains. In October, I will perform a miracle so that all may believe. October 13th arrives with low clouds and cold rain that turns the road to mud. Still they come, tens of thousands, soaked through, skirts dragging, boots sinking, newspapers held over heads like flimsy roofs. The cova becomes a wet bowl of humanity, a restless sea of faces. Near noon, Lucia cries out for people to close their umbrellas. Some obey instantly. Others hesitate, then follow, rain needling their hair and lashes. The children stare toward the oak, mouths moving in prayer. And then a break in the cloud, light like a blade. Heads tilt upward, fingers point. The crowd's sound changes from chatter to a single rising gasp, as if the sky has become the stage. By October, it's no longer 3 shepherd children and a private vision. It's a mass of witnesses, soaked in rain, staring upward at the same patch of sky, waiting for the promised miracle to prove or to break the story. Next, we move from anticipation to escalation. What people claimed the sun did that day, how the reports spread, and why the aftermath hardened belief in some and deepened suspicion in others. By mid-October of 1917, Portugal is hungry, war-worn, and on edge. And in a muddy hollow outside a small town called Fátima, a rumor has become a deadline. 3 shepherd children have promised a public sign. Not someday, not vaguely, today. On the 13th, tens of thousands decide they cannot afford to miss whatever happens next. Because if nothing happens, the story dies. But if something does, then everything changes. They come before dawn, walking in lines along country roads, wagons rattling, boots sinking into wet ground. The sky is low and bruised. Rain falls in a steady, irritating sheet that turns the cova da Iria into churned clay. People arrive wrapped in shawls and coats, some praying, some laughing, some scowling. You can hear it all at once: rosaries clicking, skeptical jokes, vendors calling, babies crying. Reporters push through with notebooks. A few officials stand back, watchful. The crowd keeps swelling until it feels less like a gathering and more like a tide that has nowhere else to go. Near noon, the rain is still coming, cold enough to sting the face. Hats drip, skirts and trousers are heavy with water, umbrellas bump and tangle like antlers. And there, at the center of it, 3 children, Lucia and her cousins, stand small against a sea of adults. People crane their necks as if belief could be measured in inches. Some shout questions, some demand proof, others hiss for silence. Then the children signal upward, and a shiver runs through the mass. It's the kind of moment when you can feel thousands of minds snapping toward a single point. Eyewitnesses say the rain falters. The cloud cover thins in patches, like a curtain yanked aside by an unseen hand. And suddenly, people are staring straight at the sun. They should be blinded, but they swear it's different. A pale disk, silvery, almost dull, hanging in a sky that looks scrubbed clean around it. Then the disk begins to move, not drifting behind clouds, moving, spinning, some say, like a wheel. Others describe a trembling, a vibration that makes the light feel alive. The crowd's sound changes from chatter to something raw. Gasps, prayers, screams caught in the throat. Color spills across the field in waves. People later insist the light turned yellow, then purple, then a harsh blood red that painted faces, clothes, and mud, as if the world had been dipped in dye. Some fall to their knees, convinced it's the end. Others stand frozen, mouths open, eyes watering, whispering, "Do you see it?" over and over like a spell. And then comes the detail that makes the whole scene tilt into nightmare. Witnesses say the sun seemed to break loose. It lurched, plunging toward the earth, growing, rushing, bearing down. Panic detonates. People cry out for mercy. Strangers clutch each other. Confessions spill into the rain-soaked air as if there's no time left. And then it stops. The disc seems to pull back into place, the terrifying descent reversed as abruptly as it began. The colors fade. The spinning, if it was spinning, calms. People blink and look around, disoriented, checking the faces of others for confirmation that they didn't imagine it. The rain, witnesses say, has ceased. And in the strangest practical detail of all, many insist their clothes are suddenly dry. Heavy fabric no longer clinging, hair no longer dripping, like the weather has skipped a step in time. The field is a chorus of trembling voices, trying to name what they just survived. This is the climax. A soaked crowd, a clearing sky, and a sun that, according to thousands, behaves like a living object, spinning, changing colors, dropping toward the earth as people scream and pray in the mud. But here's the problem. A miracle doesn't become history until someone with power decides what it means. And after October 13th, the story doesn't end in the field. It moves into newspapers, pulpits, police stations, and living rooms where witnesses, skeptics, and authorities collide. Next, we follow the key figures who shaped what the world would believe happened at Fátima. Before we get to documents, commissions, and sworn statements, we have to meet the people at the center of the storm. Not generals, not politicians. 3 children with dust on their knees and the smell of sheep on their clothes, who insisted they saw something that changed a century. In Fátima, the mystery doesn't begin with a secret. It begins with personalities. And the strange weight of a child saying very calmly, "This is what happened." Lucia dos Santos was the oldest, 10 years old in 1917, and you can almost picture her as the hinge on which the story swings. She was a village girl, but not a timid one. She negotiated with cousins, soothed frightened sheep, and learned early how adults listen differently when a child sounds certain. In accounts from neighbors, Lucia is practical, observant, sometimes stubborn. When the others panicked, she organized. When crowds demanded answers, she held her ground, describing a lady brighter than the sun without flowery poetry. Years later, in the quiet of convent walls, it was Lucia who kept writing, rewriting, clarifying. The others would become memories. Lucia became the archive. The Marto children, Francisco and Jacinta, were younger, and their differences matter. Francisco, about 9, is remembered as gentle and inward. He loved quiet fields, the soft clicking of rosary beads, the long, listening kind of silence. In the story, he's the one who sees, but doesn't hear the lady's words the way the girls do, which only deepens his intensity, as if he's trying to make up for a missing piece. Jacinta, just 7, is the spark. Quick emotions, quick tears. A child who could be delighted by a song one moment and crushed by a harsh voice the next. Yet witnesses say she carried herself with a seriousness that didn't fit her small frame, as though fear had been replaced by purpose. What endures isn't just what the children claim to see. It's how they held the claim when pressure arrived. Adults argued over them like property. Priests questioned. Officials threatened. Skeptics mocked. The children were separated, interrogated, told to recant. And still, the descriptions kept the same bones. A lady, a message, and a date circled again and again, May 13th. After 1918, the world turns cruelly intimate. Influenza arrives like a thief in the night air. Francisco fades first, then Jacinta, both dying young. Lucia survives, alone with a story everyone wants to own. Her testimony doesn't grow louder. It grows steadier. Decades later, Fatima's gravity reaches a man who would carry the world on his shoulders. On May 13, 1981, Fatima's anniversary, Pope John Paul II is in St. Peter's Square. The crowd is bright, restless, waving, calling his name. Then the cracks of gunfire, sharp, wrong, echoing off stone. He collapses, blood soaking white cloth, and the world watches a papacy almost end in seconds. John Paul later insists it wasn't only luck. One hand fired, he says in essence. Another guided the bullet. He links his survival to Our Lady of Fatima, even placing a bullet from the attack into the crown of the statue at the shrine. And in 2000, Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, stands at the center of a long-held tension: the third secret. Under his theological oversight, the Vatican publishes its text and interpretation, tying its imagery of suffering and violence to the 1981 attempt. For believers, it's confirmation. For skeptics, it's containment. Either way, the children's voices are now braided into modern history. So these are the players: Lucia, the keeper of words; Francisco, the quiet witness; Jacinta, the child with the fire; and, far down the timeline, a pope who believed a bullet curved away from death, and a cardinal who helped decide what the world would be allowed to read. But personalities and faith aren't evidence. The next question is simpler, colder, and harder to escape. What did authorities do when a village, and then a nation, demanded answers? Up next, the official investigation. In most mysteries, the cover-up is the rumor. In Fatima, the cover-up became a filing system, a handwritten message, a sealed envelope, a date stamped into Catholic imagination, 1960. Tonight, we're not chasing visions in a field. We're tracing paper through offices, through locks, through hands that promise to keep it shut. This is the official report on the third secret. The Church moved slowly, the way institutions do when they know history is watching. After the 1917 apparitions, the testimonies were gathered like evidence: names, dates, weather, the children's words, the crowd's statements. But the secrets did not become a document until decades later. Sister Lucia, now a cloistered Carmelite, was ordered by her bishop to write down what she knew. In 1944, she finally put the third secret on paper. Not in a dramatic flourish, just ink, careful handwriting, the sound of a pen scratching in a quiet cell, and the heavy feeling of committing something irreversible to a page. Procedure mattered. The text was sealed in an envelope and entrusted to the Bishop of Leiria Fátima. It was stored, locked away, and labeled with instructions that it should be opened no later than 1960, because, Lucia believed, it would be clearer then. The years passed. The envelope outlived bishops, outlasted governments, and sat through an era that made secrecy feel like a spiritual duty. War, revolutions, the Iron Curtain settling over Europe. Eventually, the document was sent onward to Rome, into the Vatican's custody. Another transfer, another signature, another key turning in another lock. Then came the moment everyone circles: 1960. The expectation was public, almost loud. Pilgrims, journalists, clergy, all waiting for the seal to break. Instead, the Vatican read it and withheld it. Pope John XXIII is widely reported to have reviewed the text and decided it would not be published. His successors, including Paul VI, also kept it closed. In the records, that choice is framed as prudence. Private revelation is not doctrine. The faithful are not owed every line. Outside the records, the silence became its own message, one that sounded to many like fear. In 1981, the file returned in a new light. After the attempt on Pope John Paul II, he requested the secret and read it as personal. Nearly 2 decades later, the Vatican chose daylight. In 2000, after the beatification of Francisco and Jacinta, Cardinal Angelo Sodano announced the third secret would be released. On June 26th, Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, then prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, presented the text and an official theological commentary. The published vision described a bishop dressed in white, a devastated landscape, martyrs on a hill, and gunfire, interpreted as the Church's 20th century suffering, culminating in the 1981 attack. But publishing it didn't end the case. For many Catholics, the 2000 release felt like closure, a symbolic vision, a plausible interpretation, a church trying to translate prophecy into history. For others, it landed like a document with missing pages. They pointed to the decades of sealing, the repeated refusals after 1960, and the tight framing of Ratzinger and Sodano's narrative. Some insisted there had to be more, an explanatory text or harsher warnings held back or blurred by official language. Next, we step into those dissenting claims and the skeptical theories that try to explain why this one envelope still won't stay shut. We've walked through the investigators, the affidavits, the weather notes, the timelines. Now we do the uncomfortable part. Because when thousands of people say the sun moved, pulsed, changed color, even danced, the question isn't only what they saw. It's how human perception behaves under stress, belief, and a blinding light overhead. Let's look through the rational eye. Start with the simplest mechanism, expectation. A crowd arrives primed for an event, trading rumors, repeating a promised sign, scanning the sky like radar. That doesn't make anyone a liar. It means the brain is already building a template for what counts as meaningful. In groups, this becomes mass suggestion. One person gasps, another points, a third says, "It's spinning." And suddenly your own ambiguous sensations lock onto the shared story. In psychology, it's social contagion and conformity pressure. Not hypnosis, just the quiet fear of being the only one who saw nothing. Then there's the sun itself, an instrument that punishes the observer. Prolonged staring can bleach photoreceptors in the retina, producing afterimages, dark spots, bright rings, crawling edges of color. Look away and the sun follows you as a ghostly disk. Look back and it can seem to wobble, expand, contract, or flicker. The effect is worse when clouds thin the glare just enough to make people think it's safe. Add tears from wind and rain, squinting eyelids, watery lenses, and you get shimmering, an apparent vibration. A crowd can unknowingly synchronize the experiment, thousands performing the same risky act, then comparing identical distortions. Atmosphere does the rest. Thin cloud layers can act like filters and screens, turning the sun into a duller disk that reveals color shifts, yellow to orange to red, through scattering and haze. Moving cloud edges can create the illusion the sun is sliding or darting as contrast changes around it. Wind-driven breaks in cloud cover can make light surge in pulses like a dimmer switch. And with moisture in the air, you can get halos, corona effects, iridescence, even faint rings that seem to rotate as the cloud texture drifts. None of this requires the sun to move. It requires our viewing window, the sky, to move and ripple while our eyes strain to interpret it. The sociological context matters too. Many witnesses arrived soaked, cold, fasting, emotionally charged, packed shoulder to shoulder. Fatigue and hunger reduce careful judgment. Excitement narrows attention. Fear amplifies pattern finding. In that state, testimony can become memory by committee. People recount the day afterward, hear more dramatic versions, and their own recollection shifts to match the dominant narrative. Meanwhile, the quiet dissenters, those who saw only bright light behind clouds, often don't publish letters, don't give interviews, don't become the story. That's selection bias. We archive the extraordinary and misplace the ordinary. Skeptically, that's the case. A primed crowd, a hazardous act of sun-gazing, and a sky full of shifting filters, enough to generate real, shared experiences without any astronomical anomaly. And it raises hard questions for eyewitness testimony. Why reports vary on timing and motion? Why distance changes descriptions? Why cameras and observatories don't record a sun behaving impossibly? But skepticism isn't an ending, because for many, the meaning of that day survives every optical explanation. Next, we step into the paranormal theories and the possibilities that science can't easily close. We've heard the skeptical explanations, the tricks of light, the hunger for hope, the politics of belief. But what if that's only the surface story? What if, for a few minutes in 1917, the sky didn't just look wrong, it was wrong? In this segment, we step into the believer's corridor, where coincidence starts to feel like choreography, and warnings arrive wrapped in radiance. Start with the simplest, most unsettling possibility: that the children at Fatima weren't inventing a story. They were receiving one. On the hillside, the air is wet with autumn, clothes heavy from rain, mud sucking at boots. Thousands wait, not for entertainment, but for an answer. Then the light changes, not like a clearing sky, like a decision being made overhead. Witnesses describe the sun as a disk you can stare at without pain, a presence that feels close, attentive, almost personal. If this was supernatural, the point may not have been spectacle. It may have been authority, a sign stamped onto the senses so strongly that later denial would feel like lying to yourself. Some accounts speak of the sun dancing, zigzagging, plunging toward the crowd. Imagine it, a bright wheel shedding colors over faces, turning rosaries into prisms, making every raindrop on a sleeve sparkle like glass. People scream, people pray, and then the ground, the clothing, the soaked air, dry. Not gradually, suddenly. Believers fixate on that detail because it behaves like intention. A miracle isn't just the impossible, it's the impossible delivered with meaning. And meaning is where the secrets enter. 3 children, 3 messages. The first visions of hell, the second warnings of war, and the spread of an error. Then the third secret, sealed, guarded, delayed. If you assume the events were genuine, that secrecy stops looking like bureaucracy and starts looking like fear. Fear of what a prophecy would do to the living. There's a paranormal theory that the phenomenon wasn't just a message, but a kind of pressure applied to reality, enough to nudge history. The sun's movement, the colors, the heat some reported, the sense of something enormous leaning close, like a veil thinned for an instant. In that frame, the third secret becomes less like a paragraph on paper and more like a volatile object, a warning that could trigger the very catastrophe it predicts. So authorities might not hide it to deceive, but to contain it, to interpret it selectively, like handling a relic that bites. And what would justify that level of caution? Some believers imagine the third secret as a divine alarm, a vision of the church wounded from within, of a world stumbling toward annihilation, of faith hollowed out until only rituals remain. Others go darker, an apocalyptic timetable, a specific betrayal, a warning about human-made fire that mimics the sun. If the message threatened not just politics, but theology, if it implied that leaders could fail, that institutions could misread heaven, then withholding becomes a kind of damage control. Not noble, not evil, just human. So, here's the uncomfortable thought the believer's view leaves us with. If the light in the sky was real in a supernatural sense, then the true mystery isn't whether people saw something, it's what that something was trying to do. Was it mercy, a warning, a test of attention? And if the third secret carried a message too sharp to release all at once, then every delay, every careful interpretation becomes part of the story. Not proof of fraud, but proof of weight. Next, we'll trace what happens when a mystery like this escapes the hillside and becomes culture. When the crowds drift away from Fatima, what's left behind? Not just candles melted into waxy rivers, not just rosaries clicking in tired hands. There's a kind of echo, a question that keeps returning with every generation. Did something truly break through in 1917? Or did history simply decide it needed a miracle? Because long after the headlines and the arguments, Fatima becomes a place you carry. And that's what we're looking at now. Its aftermath. In Portugal, the legacy has a physical address. The once open field at the Koh Vada e Rea is now a vast sanctuary complex. White stone, sweeping esplanade, and lines painted by footsteps. On major pilgrimage days, especially May 13th and October 13th, hundreds of thousands gather, sometimes more. You can hear it before you see it. A low murmur of prayer, the rustle of plastic rain ponchos, the soft scrape of knees. Some come with flowers. Some come with medical reports folded like secrets. Some arrive in silence, as if sound might disturb whatever they're hoping to meet. For believers, Fatima didn't fade into a single story. It became a devotion. The language of the messages shaped 20th century Catholic imagination. Penance, conversion, the rosary, and an urgency that felt tailored to an era of world wars and ideological fear. Popes returned to it, publicly and personally. John Paul II, after surviving the 1981 assassination attempt, credited Our Lady of Fátima for sparing his life and later placed a bullet from the attack into a crown kept at the shrine. And in 2017, 100 years after the visions, Jacinta and Francisco were canonized. Two shepherd children turned into saints. The story officially was not closing. It was becoming permanent. But permanence doesn't end controversy. The Third Secret, sealed, waited on, demanded, was published by the Vatican in 2000, describing a symbolic vision of suffering, persecution, and a bishop dressed in white struck down. For many, it fit the century's blood-stained record. For others, it didn't fit at all. And the question hardened, was that all of it? Critics point to gaps, to timelines, to reports of additional text, an unfinished sentence hanging in the air. Defenders insist the revelation is complete, that not every mystery is meant to satisfy curiosity. Either way, Fátima remains a rare religious event with a second life inside archives, footnotes, and arguments over commas. And outside the church, it never stopped traveling. Fatima shows up in films and novels, in late-night radio and internet forums, in political prophecy and spiritual self-help, sometimes reverent, sometimes opportunistic. It becomes a symbol you can plug into anything. Cold War dread, apocalyptic countdowns, debates about mass psychology, or the neuroscience of visions. Scholars sift through weather records and eyewitness statements. Theologians parse meaning and pastoral impact. Skeptics examine crowd dynamics. Pilgrims, today, walk the roads into the sanctuary with blistered feet, carrying intentions that never make the news. In the evening light, candle flames lean with the wind and recover. The air smells like smoke and hot wax. Whatever you believe happened there, people still behave as if it matters. So the aftermath of Fátima isn't a clean epilogue. It's a living place, a calendar of pilgrimages, a devotion reinforced by saints and popes, and a controversy kept warm by unanswered questions. For some, it's the clearest sign the heavens ever offered. For others, it's a lesson in how stories grow, how fear, hope, and history braid together until you can't separate the strands. And that leaves us with one final task. In our conclusion, we're going to ask what, if anything, we can responsibly say Fátima proves, and what it reveals about us. When a mystery refuses to close, it doesn't end. It lingers, like a taste of iron in the back of the throat. Fatima leaves us with that feeling. A muddy field, a crowd staring into a broken sky, and an event that people swore, quietly, loudly, tearfully, could not be explained away. Tonight, we're not hunting for a final answer. We're listening for the echo. Try to place yourself there for one slow breath. October air, cold and damp. Clothes heavy with rain. The ground churned to paste beneath boots and bare feet. The smell of wet earth rising like steam. And then, people later said, the rain stopped as if cut by a blade. Clouds thinned. Light poured through in a way that didn't feel gentle. Faces tilted upward, mouths open, some praying, some laughing from nerves, some cursing from fear, all united by the same instinct. Look. Whatever happened next, it happened to a crowd. Accounts do not land softly. They land like stones. A sun that appeared to wobble. A disk turning, throwing colors. Blue, purple, blood red, across faces and fields. Some described it as spinning like a wheel. Some said it zigzagged or plunged as though it might fall and crush the world. A few spoke of heat on skin, a strange dryness afterward, clothing and mud suddenly less wet than they should have been. But even in the telling, you can hear the fracture lines. Not everyone saw the same motion. Not everyone saw anything at all. That fracture is where the conflict lives. Believers hold the moment like a lantern. Proof that heaven leaned close, if only for minutes. Skeptics hold it like a lens. Mass expectation, optical effects, crowd psychology, human eyes and human stories doing what they have always done under stress and wonder. And between those poles is the uncomfortable middle, because something did happen. Newspapers printed it. People traveled for it, waited in rain for it, argued about it for generations. The question is not only what they saw, it's why it took root so deeply. And then there's the other shadow on the wall, the third secret. A message written down, sealed, placed into hands that promised protection and delay. Decades passed in careful silence. Silence has a sound of its own. It invites imagination and fear and certainty dressed up as rumor. When the Vatican later released its version, many accepted it with relief. Many others didn't. They heard omissions in the pauses, felt edits in the margins. A sealed text becomes more than ink. It becomes a mirror. Maybe the enduring mystery isn't a spinning sun at all. Maybe it's the human need for a boundary line. Here is the explainable world, and here is what breaks it. If Fatima was an atmospheric illusion, why did it arrive on a promised day? To a waiting crowd, with witnesses who never forgot the taste of dread and awe. And if it was a miracle, why does it still feel so slippery, so inconsistent in detail, so vulnerable to argument? The event sits at the crossroads of faith and evidence, and neither side can fully claim it. That tension is the haunting part. That concludes our investigation into this mystery. I'm Tom McKenzie. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review. And remember to visit unexplained.co for the photos we discussed today. Until next time, keep looking for the truth.